The scream hit me before I even turned the corner. It wasn't just fear, it was the kind of pain that rips straight through a parent's chest. My disabled daughter, Emily, was on the ground, her hands shaking, her eyes wide with shock as she watched her wheelchair, her only way of moving, being lifted over Karen's head like a trophy. And before I could reach them, Karen slammed it down against the pavement. The crack echoed through the whole street. Neighbors froze. A kid dropped his bike. Even the birds scattered. Emily let out a cry, so sharp it made my knees go weak, and I sprinted toward her, shouting her name. Karen just stood there, chest heaving, eyes blazing with the kind of rage only entitled tyrants have, the kind who think they own everything they see. And then she pointed at my daughter and screamed, "Maybe this will finally teach her to listen." Everything inside me snapped. She had no idea who I was, but she was about to find out. Before I dive into this story, I want to pause for a second and speak directly to you, the person watching right now. I need you to really imagine this. You're living your normal life, taking care of your family, doing everything you can for your kid, and suddenly, someone with a uniform of authority, a board badge, a little clipboard, and a massive ego decides they know better than you how your disabled child should live. That's exactly what happened to me. And trust me, you're not ready for how far this woman went. But before the story begins, Speech Balloon, tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I genuinely love seeing how people from all across the USA show up for these stories. Phoenix, Atlanta, Houston, Chicago. Every time I read your city, it reminds me that none of us are alone in dealing with people like Karen. And hey, if you're new here or if you've been watching my videos without hitting that subscribe button, backhand index pointing right, do it now. It helps the channel more than you know, and it keeps you from missing stories like this, stories that expose how cruel people can be and how powerful justice feels when it strikes at the perfect moment. All right, deep breath, because what you're about to hear isn't fiction. This wasn't some misunderstanding, some silly HOA rule, or a neighborly disagreement. This was deliberate, personal, cruel. A grown woman, a board member, made it her mission to fix my disabled daughter by tearing apart the one thing she depended on, her wheelchair. So, let's go back to the moment before everything exploded. When I still believed this neighborhood was safe, when Karen was nothing more than a mild inconvenience, and when my daughter still trusted the world around her. Because that trust, it shattered the moment Karen raised her foot and stepped into our lives with violence. It was supposed to be one of those peaceful Saturday mornings, the kind where the sun hits just right, the breeze feels gentle, and the whole world seems a little softer. Emily loved mornings like this. Ever since her accident 2 years ago, she cherished any moment that felt calm, predictable, and safe. And our neighborhood, at least on the surface, always looked like the perfect picture of calm suburbs. Trimmed lawns, slow-moving kids on bicycles, sprinklers ticking in rhythm, and those pastel-colored mailboxes that made our street look like something out of a brochure. I wheeled Emily down the front ramp, her little hands clutching the straps of her backpack, even though we weren't heading anywhere far. She just liked the feeling of being ready for the world, ready for a new day, ready for anything. That was her spirit. No matter what life took from her, she never stopped wanting to move forward. "Dad," she said softly, tilting her head as the morning sun shined on her cheeks, "can we go to the oak tree today? I want to show you the drawing I made." "Of course," I answered, tightening the blanket on her lap. "Lead the way, Captain." She giggled. Her laugh was the kind that could make you forget every bad thing in the world. But what I didn't know was that someone else was watching us from across the street. Someone whose morning didn't begin with peace or love or appreciation. Someone whose life revolved around control and the illusion of power. Karen, our HOA vice chair. Our self-appointed neighborhood morality officer, the woman who treated every blade of grass, every parked car, every little noise as if it personally insulted her. Nobody liked her, but everyone feared her because she wasn't just bossy. She was vindictive. She remembered every face, every wrong move, every perceived disrespect. Her brain was a filing cabinet of grudges. And today, She had her eyes locked onto my daughter. It started small. As we moved down the sidewalk, I could feel the weight of her stare from her porch. She stood there, arms folded tightly, lips pressed together as if someone had stapled them. The second she saw Emily, her face tightened, not with concern but irritation, as if my daughter's very existence somehow violated an invisible HOA policy. I gave her a polite nod, because I was still trying to be civil, still trying to believe that neighbors should at least pretend to be decent. She didn't nod back. Instead, she scribbled something onto her clipboard. Scribbled about my daughter sitting in her wheelchair. "Dad, why is she looking at us like that?" Emily whispered. "Don't worry," I said, but my voice faltered. "She's just checking something." Emily wasn't convinced, and honestly, neither was I, because over the last few weeks, I'd noticed something unsettling. Karen's observations had slowly begun focusing on us. A note about our ramp not being in style, a complaint about our accessible van being too big, a warning about leaving Emily's wheelchair near the curb while I loaded groceries, all disguised as HOA compliance reminders. But today, she wasn't hiding behind paperwork. Today, she was watching with a cold, focused intensity like she was waiting for something. We made it to the old oak tree near the park entrance, Emily's favorite spot. She pulled out her sketchbook and flipped to a page filled with bright colors, shaky lines, and adorable shapes. A house, a sun, a wheelchair with wings, and at the center, a little girl smiling. "This is me," she said proudly, "flying." And for a few moments, everything felt perfect again. Kids were running around the park. Dogs barked in the distance. Sprinklers hissed softly in front lawns. The world was moving but peacefully. That's when a shadow fell across the page. I looked up, and there she was, Karen, clipboard in hand, sunglasses on, smile nowhere in sight. "Good morning," I tried. She didn't reply. Instead, she leaned forward slightly, her eyes sliding from me to my daughter. She stared at her wheelchair, as if it were some kind of trash dumped on her perfectly manicured neighborhood. "You know," she said, her voice icy, "wheelchairs are supposed to stay indoors unless in active use. You people leave it outside too much." I blinked. "It is in active use. She's literally sitting in it." Karen hissed out a slow breath through her nose, as if I'd personally ruined her entire week. "That's not what I meant. The HOA has standards, and frankly, this model is unsightly." Unsightly. She said it like my daughter's mobility was a piece of junk furniture ruining her aesthetic. Emily shrank back, a little, holding her sketchbook tightly. She wasn't used to hostility. She wasn't used to grown adults talking to her like she was an inconvenience. I felt heat rising in my chest, but I kept my voice even. "Karen, she needs this chair. If you have a problem, take it up with me, not her." "Oh, I fully intend to," she said sharply, "because people like you think rules don't apply. You think you get special treatment because of this?" She gestured vaguely at Emily, as if her disability was an excuse we were milking. I stepped between them, my jaw tightening. "Enough. We're trying to have a peaceful morning." But she didn't move. She didn't back off. She didn't even blink. Instead, she leaned around me and pointed directly at Emily's wheelchair footrest, tapping it with her pen like it was a sign of crime. "This thing is damaging the pavement," she declared. "The HOA won't tolerate it." "It's a footrest," I snapped. "It's not damaging anything." She smirked, that cruel smirk that told me she wasn't done. "Not even close." "Well," she said, turning sharply, "I'll be filing a formal complaint. And trust me, you won't like the consequences." And with that, she walked away, leaving a trail of bitter energy behind her. Emily looked up at me, her voice small. "Dad, did I do something wrong?" I knelt beside her, taking her hand. "No, baby, you did nothing wrong. Some people are just unhappy, and they want everyone else to feel that way, too." She nodded, but her eyes stayed on Karen's retreating figure, a shadow that seemed to grow longer and darker with each step. I didn't know it yet, but that was the moment everything started to shift. The moment Karen decided she had a mission. A mission to control us. A mission to fix what she believed was ruining her perfect world. A mission that would lead her to do something unthinkable. Something I would never forgive. Something that would make this peaceful morning explode into violence, heartbreak, and justice. If Section 1 was the calm before the storm, Section 2 was where the clouds started gathering, thick, heavy, and full of warning. But I didn't notice it immediately. When you're a parent of a disabled child, small battles blend into daily life. You get used to advocating, to shielding, to explaining things people should already understand. But Karen, she wasn't clueless. She was calculated, obsessed, and she fixated on us like we were a threat to her perfect little fantasy neighborhood. 2 days after the oak tree confrontation, I found the first letter. A bright yellow slip taped aggressively to our front door, flapping in the wind like a warning banner. HOA notice in big block letters. I pulled it off, already sensing her handwriting even before I read the note. Your daughter's wheelchair is non-compliant with HOA visual standards. Immediate modification or replacement is required. Modification? Replacement? Was this woman serious? Wheelchairs aren't decorative items, they're lifelines. But Karen treated it like an ugly garden gnome ruining her landscape. I crushed the letter in my fist and tossed it in the trash. Later that afternoon, Emily was playing with her coloring kit at the porch table, humming softly, her small legs swinging gently from her seat. I loved moments like that, tiny glimpses of normal childhood. But then came the sound that made my stomach tighten, the clicking of Karen's heels on the sidewalk. Sharp, predictable, like a ticking time bomb. She didn't bother greeting us. She marched straight to the ramp, our ramp, examining it like a crime scene. This slope is unacceptable, she said, not even looking at me. It doesn't match neighborhood guidelines. You need to repaint and adjust the angle. It's built according to ADA requirements, I replied, keeping my voice level. She scoffed. Well, this is an HOA neighborhood. ADA doesn't override aesthetics. Aesthetics. My daughter's accessibility was an eyesore to her. Emily tried to offer a polite smile. She always tried. My dad built it so I can go down safely, she said, her voice small but brave. Karen bent down, lowering herself to Emily's eye level. For a moment, I hoped she'd soften. Maybe show a shred of humanity. But she didn't. You need to learn to live more neatly, she said, her tone dripping with judgment. Only adults can weaponize. Your things shouldn't clutter the neighborhood. Emily's little fingers tightened around her crayon. She didn't understand. She'd never understand why someone would speak to her like that. Karen, I snapped, stepping between them, stop talking to her that way. She straightened up, adjusting her sunglasses. Maybe you should stop making your child an excuse for rule breaking. That sentence buried itself in my chest, deep, and it stayed there. That night, I filed a formal complaint to the HOA board, but they never replied. Because, of course, Karen was the board. She practically controlled it. Over the next week, things got worse. Much worse. On Monday, I found another warning placed directly on Emily's wheelchair, like a tag on a piece of faulty equipment. Wheelchair must not be left visible in driveway. It wasn't left visible. Emily had been sitting in it. On Wednesday, she took pictures, actual pictures, of my daughter, of her chair, of me pushing her down the ramp. She did it openly, not caring that we saw. What are you doing? I demanded, shielding Emily with my body. She just smirked, documenting violations. Violations of what? Property uniformity. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She's a kid, a disabled kid. Have some decency. Oh, don't lecture me about decency, Karen snapped. Your child's equipment is lowering property values. I'm doing my duty. Her duty. That's what she called her harassment. Emily started avoiding the porch altogether. She'd peer through the curtains before asking, "Is she out there, Daddy?" Sometimes she was. Standing. Watching. Waiting. Like a hawk circling prey. One morning, Emily didn't want to go outside at all. Not even to draw under the oak tree. That broke me. She loved that tree. But Karen had turned a peaceful place into a battlefield. Then came the day Emily arrived home from school with tears dried on her cheeks. "What happened, sweetheart?" I asked, kneeling beside her wheelchair. She hesitated. "Karen talked to me at the bus stop." My heart sank. What did she say? I asked gently. Emily swallowed hard. She said, "People like me should stay inside. That I'm making the neighborhood look messy." Messy. She called my daughter messy. I felt something dark boil inside me. Something I hadn't felt in years. Karen wasn't just nitpicking anymore. She was emotionally targeting my daughter, breaking her confidence, crushing her spirit. And the part that haunted me most? Emily believed it. She asked quietly, "Dad, would people like it better if I didn't have a wheelchair?" My heart shattered. I cupped her face. "Baby, don't ever think that. You don't need to change for anyone, especially not people who can't see your worth." She nodded, but her eyes were dimmer. She was carrying pain no child should ever feel. But Karen wasn't done. She escalated. She always escalated. On Friday morning, when I stepped outside to load groceries into the van, I found Karen already there, crouched next to Emily's wheelchair, which I'd parked beside the ramp for just a moment. She had a measuring tape in one hand and a permanent marker in the other. "What are you doing?" I yelled, rushing over. She didn't flinch. "Marking unauthorized dimensions. That's her wheelchair. Her medical equipment." "And it's too wide," she snapped. "Way too wide. This kind of device needs to be regulated. You people can't just clutter the neighborhood with this machinery." Machinery. Emily's lifeline machinery. I yanked the wheelchair back. "This is harassment." She stood up slowly, a twisted satisfaction spreading across her face. "You can call it whatever you want, but the HOA is watching. And if you don't make changes..." She leaned closer, her voice a venomous whisper. "I will." Those words, they weren't a threat. They were a promise. And deep inside, I knew something terrifying. Karen wasn't done escalating. She wasn't close. She was building toward something violent, something cruel, something irreversible. And I should have seen the signs. Because when a person obsessed with control feels powerless, they don't calm down. They explode. And the thing she would explode at was my daughter's wheelchair. The destruction was coming. But the way it happened, the brutality of it, the timing, the rage, I never imagined it would be that bad, that fast, that personal. But Karen was preparing for war. And she thought she already won. Saturday should have been peaceful. A slow morning, quiet streets, a chance for Emily to breathe without feeling judged. But peace doesn't survive when someone like Karen has made you her personal mission. And that morning she woke up choosing violence. I was inside the house, packing Emily's sketch kit and snacks so we could spend some time at the oak tree again, a place she'd been avoiding all week because of Karen's constant presence. But today, she said quietly, "Dad, I want to try again. I want to be brave." And I kissed her forehead and told her she already was. She waited in her wheelchair on the porch, tracing circles on the armrest with her finger. I could hear the soft sound of wheels moving gently back and forth, her way of calming herself. But then, I heard another sound. Heavy footsteps. Slow. Purposeful. The kind that made my instinct spike. I didn't know Karen was already out there. I didn't know she'd been circling the neighborhood all morning like a predator searching for an excuse. And the second she saw Emily alone on the porch, she saw opportunity. "Still cluttering the street, I see," Karen snapped. I heard Emily's small gasp from inside the home. I froze. My hands tightened around the sketch kit. I stepped quickly out the door, but I was too late. Karen was already on the porch, already too close, already staring at the wheelchair like a beast sizing up its target. Emily tried to speak, her voice trembling. "My dad's coming, please don't." But Karen's foot slammed into the side of the wheelchair. Hard. The metal rattled violently. Emily jolted, grabbing the armrest, her eyes wide with panic. "Hey!" I roared, sprinting toward them. Karen didn't even look at me. She kicked the footrest again. Kick, kick, kick. The sound of metal bending echoed across the street. Emily cried out, "Stop! Stop!" But Karen wasn't stopping. She was in some twisted trance, fueled by entitlement, anger, and the need to dominate. "This junk," Karen shouted, punctuating each word with another kick, "does not belong in MY neighborhood." I reached the bottom of the porch steps just as Karen grabbed the side of the wheelchair and flipped it halfway sideways, nearly throwing Emily out. "Stop!" I screamed. "That's my daughter's chair." And this is what she said, a sentence that will haunt me for the rest of my life. "Maybe she'll walk if you stop letting her rely on this thing." Emily sobbed, clutching her seat as Karen yanked the chair back upright, only to shove it forward again. "Please." Emily cried. "Dad." I lunged upward, but Karen was already lifting the wheelchair frame, lifting it with both hands like a monster possessed. Emily slipped from the seat onto the porch floor, whimpering in pain as her legs folded under her. And then Karen raised the wheelchair above her head. For a second, everything froze. The world held its breath. A couple walking their dog on the other side of the street shouted, "HOA, what are you doing?" Kids on bikes screeched to a stop. A neighbor across the lawn dropped his coffee mug. But Karen didn't hear anyone, didn't see anyone, didn't care. She screamed, a sound of pure, twisted righteousness, and slammed the wheelchair down onto the pavement. The crash was deafening. Metal bent, plastic snapped, pieces scattered across the concrete. Emily screamed louder than I'd ever heard her scream in her life. I reached her and wrapped her in my arms, shielding her from whatever Karen did next. Her little body trembled violently. She wasn't just scared, she was broken inside. Why she do that? Emily sobbed into my chest. Why she hate me? My heart splintered. I looked up, eyes filled with fury, ready to tear Karen away from the debris. But she wasn't done. Not even close. Karen stepped forward and stomped on the smashed wheelchair frame. Again and again, grinding it into the pavement like it was trash beneath her feet. "I'm doing this community a favor," she shrieked. "I told you I'd take care of it. If you didn't..." Neighbors finally intervened. Mr. Henderson rushed across the lawn, yelling, "Karen, are you insane?" A teenager pulled out his phone, recording everything. Two moms shielded their kids, whispering, "Don't look, don't look." Karen turned on them with wild eyes. "You all know I'm right. This chair is illegal. It's messy. It's ruining everything." "It's a child's medical chair," someone screamed back. Emily clung to me, shaking uncontrollably. Her breathing came fast and shallow, almost a panic attack. I held her tighter, whispering, "You're safe. I've got you. I promise, baby, I've got you." Karen swung around suddenly, pointing her finger at us. "You people think you're above the rules because of her. You're using that child to manipulate sympathy. Well, not anymore." I stood up slowly, still holding Emily. My voice was shaking with both rage and heartbreak. "Karen," I said quietly, "you just made the biggest mistake of your life." She smirked. "Oh, please, what are you going to do? Cry to the HOA?" The neighbors murmured, watching closely, waiting. I took a step forward, my voice low and calm, the kind of calm that only comes right before a storm. "You destroyed her medical equipment. You endangered a child. You assaulted her. You traumatized her. And you did it all proudly." Karen scoffed and began to lift the broken wheelchair again, as if ready to throw it at the trash bin like a piece of junk. But then, behind me, I heard the distant wail of sirens. Someone had already called 911, and the look of panic that flickered across Karen's face was the first sign that reality was finally catching up to her. "Who called the cops?" she screamed. "I am the HOA. You can't do this." But she had no idea. Not yet. Not until the moment the officers stepped out of the patrol car and addressed me with respect. Not until she heard them say, "Sir, what happened here?" Not until she realized she had destroyed the wheelchair of a child belonging to someone she should never have picked a fight with. Someone she should have never underestimated. Because Karen didn't know. I was now the newly elected HOA president, and her reign of terror was about to end. The flashing blue and red lights painted the street in trembling colors, reflecting off the broken pieces of my daughter's wheelchair scattered across the pavement like a crime scene. Emily clung to me with both arms around my neck, her breathing still shaky, her cheeks stained with tears. I held her close, rubbing her back, whispering the same sentence again and again, "You're safe now. Daddy's right here." But even as I comforted her, my eyes were locked on Karen. For the first time since this nightmare began, she wasn't shouting, kicking, or stomping. She was frozen, caught between rage, fear, and something else I couldn't read. Maybe she finally realized how far she'd gone. Maybe the screaming neighbors, the recording phones, the sirens finally cracked the illusion of her invincibility. The officers stepped out, hands resting calmly near their belts. One of them, Officer Ramirez, approached me first. "Sir, we got reports of an altercation and property destruction involving a minor." "Not property," I said coldly, tightening my grip on Emily. "Her medical device." Karen lunged forward. "That is not a medical device. That is an eyesore. I was protecting HOA standards." "Ma'am," the second officer interrupted firmly, "step back." But Karen didn't step back. She doubled down. She always did. "You people don't understand. He's been ignoring complaints for weeks. This wheelchair is too big, too loud, too necessary for her life." I snapped. "Which you destroyed." The officers exchanged looks, and Ramirez radioed something quietly. Karen's eyes darted around, taking in the neighbors, whispering, pointing, filming. Her power, her imaginary throne, was collapsing in real time, and she couldn't handle it. "This is harassment," she shouted at the officers. "I'm a board member. I uphold the regulations that keep this place decent." One officer stepped closer. "Board member or not, destroying a disabled child's mobility equipment is a criminal offense." Karen blinked, hard, as if the words didn't process, as if reality wasn't allowed to call her wrong. "This neighborhood is better when people follow rules," she hissed. "He and that child ruined everything. Everything." And then something snapped. Not in me, in her. Because beneath Karen's rage, I suddenly saw something else. Something twisted, buried deep and ugly. Fear, resentment, bitterness. The kind that festers quietly until it spills into cruelty. The truth was this. Karen wasn't just a bad neighbor. She wasn't just controlling. She wasn't just power-hungry. Karen was broken, and she wanted the world around her to break with her. When the officers pulled me aside to take a statement, one of the moms from across the street approached. "We've all seen it," she whispered. "She's been spiraling for weeks." Another neighbor added, "Her divorce hearing was last month. She lost almost everything. She's taking it out on everyone." And suddenly it clicked. Her obsession with rules, her constant patrolling, her rage toward my daughter's wheelchair, her need to dominate every inch of this neighborhood. Karen had lost control of her own life. So she clung to the HOA as her last piece of power, her last identity, her last sense of authority. It didn't excuse anything she did, but it explained everything. While the officers documented the smashed wheelchair, Karen paced back and forth like a malfunctioning machine. "You don't get it," she muttered. "You don't get it. Nobody respects me. Nobody listens. Nobody follows the rules. I'm the only one holding this place together." "You're tearing it apart," I said quietly. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a moment, her eyes weren't angry, they were desperate. "You think you're better than me. All of you do. I think," I said, my voice controlled but heavy, "that you hurt a child, and nothing makes that acceptable." Her expression twisted again. "It's that chair," she spat. "That thing is everywhere. In the driveway, on the ramp, on the sidewalk. It ruins the neighborhood's appearance. It reminds me of—" She cut herself off, but the sentence hung in the air. "It reminds you of what?" I pressed. She shook her head violently. "Nothing. Just nothing." But her eyes gave her away. For Karen, the wheelchair wasn't just an object. It was a symbol, a trigger. Something about it threatened her fragile, collapsing identity. Maybe it reminded her of weakness. Maybe of someone she'd lost. Maybe of the life she no longer had. But whatever it was, she tried to destroy it so she wouldn't have to face herself. The officers approached again. "Sir, we've seen enough. There's substantial damage, multiple witnesses, video evidence, and endangerment of a disabled minor. We're taking her in for questioning." A murmur rippled through the neighbors. Karen's face drained of color. You can't," she gasped. "I am the HOA." And that's when I spoke the truth she wasn't expecting. "No, Karen. You were." She blinked. "What are you talking about?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out the freshly printed confirmation letter, the one I hadn't even opened yet this morning, the one the HOA board slid into my mailbox in silence after last night's election votes. I unfolded it slowly, deliberately, letting the weight of the moment fall around us. Then I handed it to the officers. Officer Ramirez read the top line aloud. "Notice, congratulations, you have been elected HOA president." The neighbors fell silent. Karen's jaw dropped. Her world, her illusion of control, shattered in an instant even more violently than she'd shattered the wheelchair. "You," she whispered. "You're the new—" "No, no, no." Her hands trembled. Her voice cracked. The truth finally crushed her. She had just destroyed the wheelchair of a disabled child whose father now had full authority over her position, her complaints, and her future in the HOA. And for the first time since I'd known her, Karen was scared. Because justice wasn't coming. It was already here. Karen's panic spread across her face like wildfire, eyes darting from the officers to the neighbors, then finally to me. For the first time, the woman who spent months acting like a queen of the neighborhood looked small, fragile, cornered. Her kingdom had collapsed in less than 5 minutes, and she knew it. You can't be HOA president," she stammered, her voice trembling between anger and disbelief. "This has to be a mistake. I've been running this board for years. People respect me." A few neighbors exchanged looks and laughed under their breath. Not loudly, not cruelly, just a tired, relieved kind of laugh, as if they'd been waiting for someone to finally dethrone her. Officer Ramirez folded the letter and tucked it into my hand. "Sir, congratulations," he said calmly. "Now, can you walk us through the events leading to the destruction of your daughter's equipment?" I nodded, holding Emily securely as she tucked her face into my shoulder, exhausted from crying. "Absolutely. But my daughter needs a moment. She's shaken." One of the neighbors, Mrs. Patel, stepped forward. "Let me take her inside for a minute," she offered gently. "I'll stay with her so you can talk." Emily looked at me, eyes still brimming with fear, but trusting Mrs. Patel's warm smile. "It's okay, sweetheart," I whispered. "I'm right here. I'll be in the doorway. I won't leave." She nodded weakly, and Mrs. Patel carried her inside. Now it was just me, the officers, the neighbors, and Karen. And the showdown she never saw coming. "All right," Officer Ramirez said, turning toward Karen, "we have testimony from multiple witnesses, visual damage, and a minor placed at risk. You're going to come with us." Karen's whole body tensed. "No, you can't take me." I was enforcing HOA rules. One neighbor called out loudly, "You weren't enforcing rules, you were terrorizing a child." Another added, "We've seen you harassing this family every day." And we have it all on video. The teenager with the phone chimed in, waving his device. Karen's mouth fell open. "You little, give me that," she snapped, lunging toward him. The officer stepped between them instantly. "Ma'am, stop. Now." Her hands dropped. Her chest heaved. Her eyes darted again toward me, desperate, pleading. "You can make this go away," she said softly, almost whispering. "You're president now. You can undo the complaints, withdraw everything. Tell them it was misunderstanding." I stepped closer, my voice cold enough to freeze the air between us. "You destroyed a disabled child's wheelchair. You traumatized her. You emotionally abused her. You threatened us. And you think I'll protect you?" Her lips trembled. I didn't mean to hurt her." I clenched my jaw. "You lifted the chair over your head and slammed it on the ground. You meant every second of it. One of the officers added, "Intent is irrelevant. Your actions speak for themselves." But Karen wasn't done. She never stopped fighting, not even when she was already defeated. She jabbed her finger toward me and screamed, "He's manipulating all of you. He's turning you against me. I built this neighborhood. I kept the standards. Without me, this place will fall apart." This time, it wasn't laughs that answered her. It was silence. A firm, united silence. Because everyone finally saw her for what she really was. Not a protector, not a leader, not even strict, just cruel, unstable, abusive, and everyone was done with it. Officer Ramirez spoke again. "Ma'am, put your hands behind your back." Karen froze. "No, ma'am." I said no. She stepped backward, tripping slightly over the twisted metal on the pavement, and for a second her face twisted with something like fear. But she still tried to salvage her power. "You can't arrest me," she said shakily. "This is MY neighborhood." I looked her directly in the eyes. Not anymore. Her chest rose sharply. Her jaw clenched. She looked like she wanted to scream again, like she wanted to fight. But finally, the fight drained out of her. She slowly turned around and placed her hands behind her back. The officers cuffed her gently but firmly. And just like that, the woman who ruled the neighborhood with fear was finally powerless. As they walked her toward the patrol car, she looked back at me. Not with anger this time, but with a hollow, defeated stare. "You ruined my life," she whispered. I exhaled. "No, Karen, you ruined it yourself." The moment the car door shut, the neighborhood exhaled collectively. People who hadn't spoken to each other in months suddenly started talking, offering help, apologizing to me for not stepping in sooner, asking if Emily was okay. It was like Karen's arrest released the entire street from a cage. A few neighbors helped me gather the broken wheelchair pieces. It was heartbreaking: bent metal, shattered wheels, cracked frame. Parts of it were crushed beyond recognition. "My God," one neighbor said, shaking his head. "How could anyone do this to a child?" I swallowed hard. She didn't see Emily as a child. She saw her as an inconvenience. When I carried the broken pieces inside, Emily saw them, and her face crumpled. "That was my chair," she whispered. I knelt in front of her. "I know, sweetheart, and we'll get you a better one. Stronger, safer, something no one will ever hurt again." She nodded slowly, wiping her tears. "Daddy, is Karen gone?" "Yes," I said gently, "and she's not coming back." Emily leaned against me, finally letting her shoulders relax. And right then, without realizing it, justice had landed. Not just for me, not just for the community, but for a child who deserved peace more than anything. And this was only the beginning, because as HOA president, I wasn't done cleaning up Karen's damage. Not by a long shot. The hours after Karen's arrest felt strangely quiet, almost too quiet, like the neighborhood itself was trying to process what had just happened. For months, her voice had filled every corner of the street, barking orders, writing warnings, making everyone uneasy. Now silence. A peaceful silence. A healing silence. Inside the house, Emily was curled up on the couch with a blanket wrapped around her legs, sipping warm cocoa that Mrs. Patel had made. Her eyes were still red, but at least she wasn't trembling anymore. Every few minutes, she'd glance toward the window, checking to make sure Karen wasn't out there. Trauma doesn't disappear quickly. Not when you've watched your independence get smashed into pieces on the pavement. I sat beside her quietly, not talking, not pushing, just being there. When you're a parent, sometimes silence is the greatest comfort you can give. "Daddy," she whispered eventually, her voice tiny, fragile. "Am I safe now?" The question cut straight through me. No child should ever have to ask that. I took her little hand into mine. "Yes, sweetheart, you're safe. Karen can't hurt you anymore." She nodded slowly, but her eyes still held a shadow, one that would take more than words to erase. Later that evening, neighbors began dropping by, one by one. Quiet knocks at the door, soft apologies, offers of help. A couple brought homemade soup. Another left a small bag of toys for Emily at the doorstep with a note that read, "You are strong. Don't let anyone dim your light." Two teens volunteered to help build a temporary pushchair setup. Even people who had never talked to us before now stood in our living room, ashamed they hadn't stepped in sooner but determined to support us now. They weren't just being neighborly, they were healing, too. Karen hadn't just terrorized us. She'd bullied half the street into silence. And now, without her presence, people finally felt free. By the next morning, the story had already spread. A neighbor posted the video of Karen smashing the wheelchair on the community page. Public, raw, undeniable. The footage had everything: Karen screaming, kicking, lifting the chair, slamming it down, accusing Emily of ruining the neighborhood. The comments section exploded. How could someone do that to a child? I'm disgusted. I always knew she was unhinged. Thank God she's finally gone. We support your family. Messages poured in from streets away. People offering old wheelchair parts, knowing someone who knew someone who could rush a replacement, offering transportation, meals, or simply words of comfort. Emily read a few of the comments before shyly closing my laptop. "They're being nice," she said softly. Do they really like me?" I smiled and kissed her head. "They always did, sweetheart. They were just scared of Karen. But now they're standing up for you." Her shoulders relaxed a little, and for the first time since the attack, I saw a tiny spark return her eyes. The following week, I attended my first official HOA meeting as president. Every seat was filled. People packed into the room like they were witnessing history. Karen's chair at the front of the room, her throne, sat empty. And for the first time in years, nobody avoided that seat. Nobody whispered. Nobody tensed. I stood at the podium, cleared my throat, and said, "Starting today, things change. No more bullying. No more harassment. No more fear. This will be a community that protects its families, especially its children." A loud wave of applause erupted. Some neighbors even stood. Then I held up what was left of Emily's wheelchair footrest, bent, cracked, barely recognizable. "This," I said, voice echoing, "is why we're starting over." Another wave of applause. Another moment of healing. We passed new policies. No harassment based on disability. No HOA control over medical equipment. Strict rules against aggressive conduct. An emergency hotline for disputes. Community safety protocols. We rebuilt the system Karen had weaponized, this time for good. A few days later, Emily's custom wheelchair arrived, sent early thanks to a friend of a neighbor who worked at a medical supplier. The chair was stronger, safer, and more comfortable than the last. The moment Emily sat in it, her whole face lit up. "It's beautiful," she said, stroking the armrest. "And it's yours," I whispered. "Forever." We took a slow walk to the oak tree that afternoon, the same oak tree where Karen first confronted us. Emily hesitated at first, glancing around nervously, but when she realized Karen wasn't lurking, she rolled herself forward. The leaves rustled overhead. Sunlight filtered through the branches, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she drew. Not a shaky drawing, not a scared one, but a bright, hopeful picture. A girl in a wheelchair, smiling under a tree, with wings again. "Look, Daddy," she said, holding it up. "I can draw again." I swallowed hard. It's perfect. And it was. Healing doesn't happen in an instant. But that moment, that picture, was the first step. Weeks later, Karen pled guilty. The video evidence was too strong. The witness testimonies were overwhelming. She was ordered to pay damages, attend mandatory counseling, and stay away from our family permanently. And just like that, her reign was over. Neighbors stopped whispering. Kids played freely. The street felt lighter, safer, kinder. Emily's confidence slowly rebuilt. She went outside more. She smiled more. She even made a friend down the block. The neighborhood wasn't perfect, but it was no longer held hostage by one woman's misery. Justice came. Peace followed. And if you're still here listening to this story, let me leave you with this. Every community has a Karen. Someone who thinks control equals power. Someone who forgets that kindness is stronger than rules. Someone who hurts others to mask their own pain. But every community also has people like you, people who stand up when it matters, people who refuse to stay silent, people who choose compassion over fear. And in the end, that's what saves us. That's what heals us. That's what protects children like my daughter. And that's why I tell these stories. Not for views, not for drama, but because somewhere out there, someone needs to hear this. Someone needs to know they are not alone. Someone needs hope. Someone needs courage. And maybe, just maybe, this story gives them that. If you stayed with me through this entire story, thank you. Stories like this aren't easy to hear, and they're even harder to live through. But by watching, by listening, and by supporting families like ours, you're helping make sure no child ever has to face something like this alone again. Before you go, I want to hear from you. Which city are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. I read every single one, and it means more than you know. And if this story moved you, if it made you feel something, if you believe in justice, in kindness, in protecting the innocent, hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Your support helps this channel grow, helps these stories reach more people, and keeps this community strong. Thank you for being here. Stay safe, stay kind, and I'll see you in the next story.